This roundtable on reinventing net neutrality was about as good as it gets. What are we going to do about ensuring net neutrality long term, particularly in this short window here that the FCC has a comment period going through this summer? The basic big thing to come out of this was like, now is the time, if you ever care about the internet, to actually make your voice known and do what you can to move the ball to ensure net neutrality.
If you ever cared about network neutrality, now is the time to act. Through comments, through talking to representatives, and frankly, through helping make this issue seem salient to people who don't spend a lot of time thinking what goes on the router, but nevertheless use and rely on the internet.
You know, the future of the internet is the future of everything, every industry, every economy, everything from, you know, transportation to payments to education to e-commerce.
The impact on consumers and citizens is not just about how fast Netflix videos play, although yes, that's important. We have benefited from an open internet without fast lanes and slow lanes. I think that's incredibly important for the future and health and vibrancy of our democracy. Our job, right, is to make it a big enough issue.
There really are two major ways under debate right now about how to proceed to preserve net neutrality.
Title II is a law passed by Congress that gives the FCC the authority to enact regulations. It's almost like, you know, it's a permission slip. And the Title II permission slips say anyone who's a common carrier subject to Title II shall not engage in unreasonable practices and shall not engage in unreasonable and unjust discriminations. The FCC would say, we think that it's unjust and unreasonable per se for the ISPs to adopt fast lanes and slow lanes and paid prioritization. So that's how you would do it. It can totally be done. What I hear from the other side very often is that 706 is stronger than we think it is, and Title II is weaker than we think it is. And my analysis is, 706 requires discrimination, requires access fees, and Title II is very strong, very robust, gives you tons of tools and authority.
There's a lot of ideas on what can be done now to actually, in this really critical juncture, this very short time frame over the summer here and into the fall, what people can do. Many great suggestions.
I think people should talk about this issue, and they should call their congressman, talk to their neighbors and their distant relatives. I think they should tell their story to the FCC. I think they should figure out creative ways to be involved in ensuring that the internet remains open and free. And so if you are a cartoonist, you know, make a cool cartoon. If you're a singer, write a song that goes viral about the open internet.
The FCC is unusually focused on business interests in this conversation. And one of the things you can do when filing a comment is if you run or work at a business which as a user of bandwidth would be negatively affected, those comments I think will be especially helpful and especially resonant.
I think that a lot of the flood of comments that have come in have not been very helpful. I mean, it's good to remind that people care about these issues, but if it's just denigrating the FCC, I don't think that those are very helpful for the public at large to comment. Keep it clean and reasonable.
Trying to support the groups which may show a chance at an emergent movement.
I think the key is mobilizing consumer focus on this issue in a way that is incredibly relevant to them and invest them in not just expressing themselves to the FCC. I agree, now is the time, and through other political channels, but in taking a sense of ownership over this, to thinking about having that conversation with their neighbor next door about it, and are there things they can do together.
The important thing to happen next is for people to call President Obama, call their member of Congress, join Free Press, join Fight for the Future, join Move On, join the organizations that are vital supplements to all the creative individual action out there. We also have a collective action challenge here, which is that we need to be acting together to make our voices heard. As a regular citizen, make your voice heard.
Now, despite the push to make the internet a public utility under Title II, there was also a lot of realistic discussion about other plans. There's a plan B, which is to get the best possible terms in the current debate at the FCC right now.
I think if I had to characterize the difference between me and Doug would say Plan B is effectively better than I am imagining and can provide more of what we want at lower cost.
I think that there's a lot of room to work with under 706, and I honestly think it's unfortunate the way that Wheeler's initial proposal was spun in the press to say that this is, inherently fast lanes and slow lanes. I'm not sure it's entirely clear that Title II, the original Plan A, can do really all the work that you all want it to. At least if you think of it in terms of the old school phone regulations, it's clear that all sorts of discrimination is allowed under that. I mean, the phrase is slightly different. Under 706, it would be commercially reasonable discrimination that would be allowed. Under Title II, it's unjust and unreasonable discrimination that isn't allowed. I worry that if we focus all of our energies on Title II, we end up sort of ignoring the 706, which, to be honest, the way that I read the wins in D.C., it seems that 706 is more likely.
There's ultimately some Plan Cs where we're actually building out a different kind of internet, a mesh internet, and other kind of alternative ways to get actually internet access for everybody.
There is plainly a civic model that says a city builds its own last mile. And because it captures local taxes, it effectively becomes the network operator. You move from a commercially provided to a civic provided model of bandwidth.
When you think of municipal cities building fiber, very difficult road. A lot of states out there have rules against cities building fiber. There's a lot of protectionism for the existing incumbents like Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, for Google Fiber, and other options. And I've been trying to slice and dice how this can be done. Wireless isn't yet a good enough substitute for wireline. And so we've waited for a decade or more for new competitors. I think we should encourage that as much as we can.
I'm sitting here going, what would it take for me to be able to share my internet connection with my neighbors? There's a lot of very promising things out there, from the widespread acceptance of mesh networking technology as a last mile kind of thing, both commercially and nonprofit, to the adoption and spread of personal clouds and kind of, the serverless internet kind of concept. And I'm seeing all these themes as very related to a consumer demand to get out of this trap. And call that Plan D if you want. Not all commercial actors are bad entities in this story, and there is a role for the individual open source developers and hackers and others to play as well in opening new doors for this.
At the conclusion of this 90-minute fantastic session, there was a sense of optimism. There was a can-do sense of optimism that, in fact, the internet community, the tech communities at large, have been faced with these kind of junctures before, and against all odds have actually been able to turn the politics and get some outcomes that really do work better for everybody for the long run.
We shouldn't speak like losers, guys. We're going to win. Right? We're told all the time that things are impossible. We were told, we could never have stopped SOPA. Right? We were told in 2006, I remember, there's no way net neutrality was dead then, and a bill was going to pass. I think we have a shot of winning. And I think Plan A is probably as likely as any other plan at the moment.
We actually have an interesting emergent opportunity as organizers to talk to Americans across the political spectrum about the influence of corporate lobbying in our democracy, in our rulemaking on issues that include, yes, absolutely, the future of the open internet. This is the kind of conversation that folks on the right would be interested in participating as well. On how this will play out in the next few months, we should be optimistic. We've done crazy things in the space of internet freedom before. The thing about grassroots lobbying is that it actually isn't all that surprising or new. A lot of people need to go make their voices heard, and we need to come up with some creative ways of packaging together, stimulating, and then delivering those messages.
I'm very heartened by Anna's sense that the president, having campaigned on this issue, can be brought around, because the president has disproportionate influence, obviously, over the FCC.
No matter what the president says, there are going to be parties in the media who are going to sensationalize it. So the president may be in a lose-lose situation until people like us are willing to give him the political cover that he deserves.
But I do want to echo Anna's statement about this being a collective action problem. The ordinary tools of political action have to be amplified here, precisely because it's harder to make our voices heard. Making it a national conversation, even with all of the varied strategies and so forth, because it will not be viewed simply as a kind of technocratic choice with ramifications for one narrow section of the economy, but really is a momentous political and civic choice for the country as a whole, which means that we, and ideally people listening and people following this issue elsewhere, don't just consume what people are saying about it and react in the usual political channels, but also that it becomes a social conversation as well.